America's $39 trillion empire is built on a house of cards that only remains solvent as long as foreigners hold our debt. Well, the biggest holder of U.S. treasuries is now, for the last couple of weeks, talking about dumping trillions of dollars to protect their own country and their currency. But really, is it all a coincidence that the same country just formally legalized Bitcoin as a financial asset last week? I got a lot to cover for you and a very special guest today. And honestly, no one better to fill in with me on today's show and on this topic than one of my favorite content creators, Nolan Bauerle, aka Count BTC. Guys, if you listen to the show, you know I plug Nolan all the time. So I'm super excited for this. Nolan, welcome to the show. This one's going to be a special one. So let me just dive straight into it. Nolan, like I said before the show, don't feel bad about cutting me off. I want you to be a part of this show. So first of all, guys, actually, maybe me and Nolan need to lay the context here. We're talking about Japan. And if you know anything about the Bank of Japan, they've had historically low interest rates. They've basically been the venture capital central bank for the world. And it does seem like they are in a very rough position right now. They're in a hard place right now. And there's been a lot of speculation that the end of the fiat era, free money era might be coming to an end, depending on what the Bank of Japan starts doing. And Nolan, I'm sure you've seen these leaks and speculations that have been going on Twitter. Obviously, as of now, nothing official has happened, but we've had some very interesting Bank of Japan insider posts that are really making everyone wonder what exactly is going on. And can this free money, roller coaster continue? So let me start with some of these tweets. Nolan, again, jump in when you feel like it. This is Yodo Kanzaki Real. Again, Bank of Japan insider. And this is the first tweet that got everyone kind of worried on Twitter. And it goes, the measures being prepared by the Bank of Japan will affect the lives of billions of people. To the people of the Western countries, I offer my deepest apologies. This is not a personal matter. May God's blessing be upon you. He continues, Japan's wealth is returning to its homeland by any means necessary. The Bank of Japan has decided, essentially hinting at, look, Bank of Japan is going to drop those $1.14 trillion of treasuries. They're trying to protect their currency because the Japanese yen is at like a 30-year low against the dollar. They just had to raise interest rates to 1%, which maybe doesn't sound like a lot, but when you've historically had basically 0% interest, it has ramifications for entire global economy. Going further, before I get Nolan to jump in here. Article 589 will be cited far more frequently than you imagine. Foreign borrowers should not assume that past approvals guarantee future funding. A warning to all borrowers who think they can continue to refinance through Japan. Article 589 is universal. And here's the last one. Tokyo is being forced to make the ultimate choice: to end Japan's era of low interest rates and rebuild the nation's wealth, or to continue yielding to the current pressure from the United States at the expense of Japan. History will remember this moment as the time when everything changed. This is what everyone's been watching, and we did get some updates this morning coming out of the Prime Minister. But before I get into that, Nolan, I've brought this up on the show. You, I think, are the first person to put this idea in my head of this is why Satoshi Nakamoto chose the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto. So can we start there, and then we'll kind of flush this idea out a little more?
I'm wearing my pro-Japanese Satoshi Nakamoto hat here. Indeed, the fiat, the way the whole yen carry trade has worked, the subsidy of the US dollar around the world, really was provided by the loser of World War II, Japan. And Japan, having lost World War II, was bound up in this American system that existed, not really the American system, more like the London financialized system that came from the Federal Reserve. And so Japan was put in subordination to the US system. Now, the story that we've been seeing from the beginning of this Trump administration was letting the Federal Reserve out of this role where they subordinate the Treasury. They're recalibrating the American system so that the Federal Reserve ends up being subordinate to the Treasury, which reignites this American system engine. Quite similar to what we're hearing from the Bank of Japan here. They don't want to be involved in this London system anymore. They don't want to be involved in this hyper financialized fiat system. They want to have actual production. So we've been seeing this for a long time. Now, what we understand from as Bitcoiners why the Satoshi Nakamoto pseudonym was there was because eventually what happened to Japan, all of this decade of darkness in the 90s, the yen carry trade, the inability of Japan to really create any inflation, to put interest rates up because everyone was using the yen as the subsidy for the US dollar. With that now coming to an end, with that era coming to an end, we as Bitcoiners understood and had predicted for a long time that the canary in the coal mine would be the yen carry trade winding up. Now, what does this mean for tomorrow? I think very simply, they're just going to go back to the Fed system in that they're going to park the $1 trillion or whatever of US debt that they're dumping on the market. They're not just going to go and dump it for dollars on the market. That's not what they're doing at all. They can go to the Federal Reserve and just park it at the repo facility the way a commercial bank does. And so that's likely what they're going to do with all this. They're going to go park it at the commercial bank. They're going to get more fiat for it. And it doesn't really get into the existential problem that they're in. Eventually, there's only going to be one way out of this existential problem, and they're not there yet. Everything that we've seen today, even that binary we were given, that fake choice, either they say no to America and continue to subsidize it, or they bring their money home. So it's either, in a way, when they say subordinate to America, in a way it's to the markets and the fiat world, the Federal Reserve world, not the American system. The American system that you see Trump putting together here, that you see SoftBank yesterday even talking about this thing with NVIDIA, this new power plant. You see Howard Lutnick is going to be in charge of determining where the 10 gigawatts go. So this was in the news today. NVIDIA and OpenAI talking about a 5 billion, 10 billion, I forget the exact number, a huge investment in a new data center that will bring along with it a new energy system. The data centers don't matter. It's the new energy that's coming with it. It's the incentive to build energy. You hear about Japan and America creating this agreement on nuclear energy. That's the answer here. Once they start getting around the Bitcoin balance sheet companies, and they start seeing the energy and they start behaving like SpaceX, right? SpaceX, an energy company, a rocket company, a data center company, but they keep 18,000 Bitcoin on their balance sheet in order to have that collateral discretion, the optionality there. They do that. So they have this potential. So countries are setting up the same way that Saylor set up, the same way that SpaceX set up. Japan is going to have to embrace this. They're going to have to go down the road of America, have something new in the collateral mix. They can't just park all of this former collateral. That's what they had before. Getting rid of the collateral isn't going to help. They can go park it with the Federal Reserve, as I said, and get dollars for it, but that doesn't solve the problem. They're going to have to adapt. The Bank of Japan is going to have to adapt its balance sheet. The government of Japan is going to have to adapt its balance sheet. They're going to have hard collateral on that balance sheet because the yen won't work anymore. Their government debt won't work, and them buying American government debt won't work. So everything here in this story is actually pulling Japan towards Bitcoin in the long term. In the short term, a bunch of people are going to light themselves on fire. They do that anyway. It's normal, right? And I'll even add one more bit to this. And this is an important thing. In the same way that the yen was the shock absorber in that old system, when I talk about Satoshi Nakamoto trying to have this moral authority to tell America, you're like Japan soon. Well, that's true. America is turning into Japan. The US dollar is turning into the yen carry trade. You see what Saylor did today. He's creating a yen carry trade, but instead of a yen, it's the dollar and the Bitcoin on his balance sheet. It's the same thing that happened before. So he's just replicating that. And in this case, we've thought about this for a long time about Satoshi Nakamoto, and Japan would have to do this. So what we're seeing with this American system being put into place, the US dollar, if you think in terms of where we're headed next, if you look at El Salvador, it's a bimetallic country, right? They've got US dollars, they've got Bitcoin. You look at America, we're becoming a bimetallic country. One money for consumption, one money for saving. And Japan and the yen, really what happened after World War II was everyone was allowed their own fiat Ponzi scheme. What Trump is doing this time around with the Bitcoin strategic reserve and the weaponization of the US dollar using Genius and Clarity is to really tell every other country that was in this Federal Reserve orbit, that was in this central bank fiat system, you're done. We're wrapping up all your Ponzi's. We're winding them all, rolling them all into the US dollar. So the weaponization of the US dollar is here. Now, whether Japan goes and starts stacking dollars, which they'll need, and Bitcoin, which they'll also need. That's one approach, but the yen will be even less relevant now for consumption money. It really will go ahead and become food stamps right away. And so they're on a rush to become food stamps. So the world of bimetallism, the world we're heading into, is there will be one fiat currency for a little while. The shock absorber for all of the inflation is to take these fiat currencies and just sort of wind them down into the US dollar one by one. This is going to happen with Mexico. It's already happened with Venezuela. It's happening to Argentina as we speak. As I said, El Salvador is already there. They don't have a national fiat currency anymore. They just use the US dollar for consumption and Bitcoin for savings. Argentina, with the swap that was created between Milei and Besant last year, right around his election time, effectively dollarized Argentina. It won't be long until that's completely obvious. UAE, of all countries, after the incident in Iran, the war, or whatever you want to call it, UAE got out of OPEC and then got the same swap line for US dollars that commercial banks get. They can use the repo facility. They have unlimited access to dollars in the Federal Reserve's printing, just like Japan has. So Japan and UAE are really becoming US dollar client states in this new era, and they don't really need a fiat currency anymore. So it's going to get absorbed into the dollar, it's going to get absorbed into Bitcoin, and they're going to be part of this global bimetallic system that's coming.
Yeah, 100. This is why you're one of my favorite content creators, Nolan, really putting the dots all together. And just to add to what you're saying, again, like I said, we covered this last week. I'm sure you saw this. Japan's landmark vote reclassifying Bitcoin and crypto as financial assets. The real takeaway here is literally what Nolan said. Japan's parliament approved legislation reclassifying Bitcoin as financial assets, marking a major regulatory shift, basically putting it in line with bonds and treasuries in their balance sheet. So, you know, Nolan ahead of the curve on this one. Now, this morning, I don't know if you saw this, but Financial Juice posting Japan Prime Minister Takashi, Japan must exit excessively tight fiscal policy, boost domestic investment, and put the economy on a growth path. I wonder how that's going to happen. Further, dealing with inflation is top priority. Now, of course, they are doing the public PR, spin here.
Yeah, hold on. Dealing with inflation is a priority. They want inflation.
Yeah.
Right. So don't think of it as like inflation is
exactly
in Japan. No. They have been using, and I've been using the visual narrative for a long time. It's a defibrillator. The repo market, I said this on CNBC in 2019, right before the repo rumble and right before COVID. I said at the time, look, what I see here is $25 billion being subsidized because the banks in America, the commercial banks, are already dead. They can't make money off any of these instruments that they've had before. The duration mismatches here, all the stuff they're trying to do is not going to work. So I said this repo is clearly a sign. It was 25 billion at the time. It rose to 2 trillion. I called that at the time a defibrillator. I said this is a defibrillator, and in 5 or 6 months they're going to have to print trillions of dollars or the patient will be dead. Now, I knew nothing about COVID. No one knew in September 2019 there was going to be such a thing as COVID. But indeed, they had their predicate, they had their excuse to print that money. So no one tied it to the repo market in 2019. But that's where we're at. That's where Japan is at. That's where these countries are at. They're going to have to absorb into this repo market, but the repo market isn't going to make anything work. It's a defibrillator. You just keep the patient alive by injecting a little bit of energy and electricity into them. When I hear Takeshi talk forcefully about what she's going to do for the Japanese economy, it's all about the nuclear energy. It's all about energy, just like America. She is completely in sync with Trump. When she talks about investing in Japan and growing out of this stagnation, it is energy. It's electricity. SoftBank itself has just got a bunch of money together to do this deal with OpenAI and NVIDIA in order to build this new power plant. And indeed, SoftBank could be thought of as the Japanese sovereign wealth fund. It's a venture capitalist that goes around the world with this cheap money, the duration mismatch that comes from the lower interest rates and the lower inflation in Japan, and they can go invest in places where they can get 5, 6, 7% yield. So that's what's been making this whole flywheel go for years. And now SoftBank and Masahiro-san realize they need to go actually build real things like a power plant. No more WeWork. If you guys remember WeWork, that was SoftBank. They had enough money to make WeWork function years ago. Now they got to build nuclear reactors. This is very good for the economy. It's very good for Japan. It's very good for America.
Yeah, Nolan, actually, there's a few things I want to expand on. The one thing that I've heard you say for a while, something that I've been calling like the Petrosat system for a while, you said it the other week. I think it was when you were on with Tom Luongo. You're like, what Bitcoin is showing us that there's really only two industries that matter, Wall Street and energy. And now once Bitcoin is fully embraced by the energy sector, it's game over. It's already being embraced by Wall Street, which currently I think is making a lot of people feel a little uncomfortable. You know, they're not sure if Bitcoin's a Trojan horse to Wall Street or is Wall Street co-opting us. So could you expand on that for my audience? Because I don't think that many people have heard this. I've mentioned the Petrosat system. Like once energy's priced in Bitcoin, it's game over. Like we completely won. But could you just explain your thinking on this? Because I found that to be one of the best insights I've heard in a while.
Yeah, well, you know, you're seeing it right now with the plebs crashing out against Michael Saylor, right? They're all lighting themselves on fire. Oh my God, he doesn't care about the plebs. Oh no, he hates Bitcoin now. Michael Saylor hates Bitcoin. I think it just comes down to a very simple trajectory that I've seen in the history of Bitcoin, and that is a predictive frame. So usually, if you can make observations and they predict, they're accurate. They help show an accurate worldview if they correctly predict things. So one of the frames I've used for a long time is just the human capital migration into Bitcoin. And it can't be denied that the original Bitcoiners, of course, were cryptographers. We saw the politicians come next, right? So this was the 2012 folks getting washed out of the Ron Paul campaign. This injected a bunch of human capital that didn't exist in Bitcoin before. It was real political operatives. And we still see the fruit of their work in Bitcoin to this day. They created a real awareness around Bitcoin and politics. The next one that came around were the Wall Street people that found out that Wall Street had been turned into a risk-free porno and masturbation after the 08-09 crisis because the bailouts were there. Some people want to bang for real. They want the real risk. They want to really make money. They want to potentially lose money, but that's what they're addicted to, right? Some people don't want to masturbate. They want to be in the real thing. And you had a lot of real traders come over, real people who like risk. You had Arthur Hayes and these folks come. What we're seeing today, what we're seeing happen in the markets is that these real industries, these real professionals are now actually making their voice heard. They're making their capacity to change the world apparent through Bitcoin. They're leveraging Bitcoin to change the world in these ways. And whether we like it or not, it doesn't really matter. Fiat went around the world through the subordination of Wall Street and energy markets and, you know, a bit of mass media mixed in because it needed the propagation of the worldview, and that's what the mass media did. And so with COVID, with the lack of trust in media that we see apparent all around us, I mean, Elon Musk and The Economist this weekend, she had to go and do content all weekend and goes, check out my interview with Elon Musk where he punches me in the face and makes me look like an idiot. She was for the editor-in-chief, The Economist, has to go and do content clips. Like, check out my interview. It was really weird. So that's what they're down to. No one believe, and his line to her was, people hate you more than me. And I think that's probably right because she's a legacy journalist, of course. So the pillars of fiat were kind of the financialization. It was the Wall Street folks. It was the control of that pillar. It was the control of the energy pillar. That's where really, if you boil Clayton Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma really down to its core principles, the disturbing thing out of that book is that we don't have new energy systems in America because there's no incentive, because those people now are completely taken over by both the oil and the Wall Street versions of how this flywheel works. So Clayton Christensen's book told us we weren't getting nuclear energy. You know, you had Nixon say we're going to build 1,000 nuclear reactors. We didn't get one. We didn't get one. And now we're getting them because we've broken this mold. It was that system that kept us from getting the energy. So, of course, everyone wants to see a world where Bitcoin is adopted globally because a bunch of plebs hold it. Unfortunately, that doesn't kill fiat. For that to happen, fiat would have to be more than just suicidal and have to self-immolate, and we'd have to be living in a world where you're picking bugs out of your hair and stuff like that. So that is possible. Maybe we go that way, but I think that the least aggressive, the least violent road to Bitcoinization of the world, I don't even say hyper Bitcoinization anymore, I just say Bitcoinization, a pure Bitcoin standard, it looks like it goes on the same trajectory that we in reverse anyway, that we came from. We didn't come, fiat wasn't created out of a gold standard. It was created out of bimetallism. It was created out of a world with silver and gold. Silver was for consumption, gold was for savings. That's what the Wizard of Oz was all about. It wasn't ruby red slippers on a yellow brick road. It was silver slippers on a gold brick road. The book was written 40 years before the movie. It was written at a time much like ours, in between spaces, a liminal space, a time in between. That's when McKinley was president. That's why Trump is always talking about reinvigorating this system. This was the world before the Federal Reserve came in. I think we're going out of the Federal Reserve system the same way we came into the Federal Reserve system. We're going through bimetallism. Bimetallism, the US dollar, Bitcoin standard, doesn't last forever. It lasts for probably another generation, where we have this version of fiat that rests inside of Bitcoin, on top of Bitcoin. It is still US dollars over a Bitcoin standard, which is bimetallism. It's not just Bitcoin standard. There's another part to it. It's how you unwind all of these fiat Ponzi's that are there. You use them as shock absorbers, like I said. The yen going into the US dollar, the weaponized USDT that's going around the world, that's going to decentralize demand for the dollar. It's going to cut out the middleman of the central bank and create a relationship for this money between the US government and consumers around the world. Inside of that, you're going to have the Bitcoin standard grow and proliferate as a form of hard collateral that will exist inside of this model. So that's why we have this world where the two most important industries that really do run the world, it's not necessarily fiat, it is Wall Street in the fiat system and the energy systems, and they produce weird results. And because of the incentives, that's what we're breaking, and we're taking control of those industries, Wall Street and the energy industry, and they will be benchmarked to Bitcoin. It doesn't matter what a Coca-Cola costs. It doesn't matter what a coffee costs. It doesn't matter if I can buy coffee with Bitcoin. It matters that oil price discovery has to happen in neutral markets that don't use political food stamp money like the US dollar in order to price energy. You're going to have something neutral that China, Russia, everybody agrees on, and that will be a psychological benchmark for what the price of things are that matter, like energy, not just oil, like energy. It's not exactly a petrodollar. It'll become more like an energy dollar, and it will live on top of Bitcoin in that way. So we're headed towards this bimetallic system, and that's what I think is the biggest story here. And that's why I think that the Wall Street and energy platforms are all that are needed in order to move Bitcoin into this new era.
Yeah, no, Nolan, I absolutely love when you say this, because obviously one of the things that I've noticed recently is a lot of people crashing out of like, Bitcoin's not happening how I thought it was going to happen. And I've been like, well, maybe our theories were, a little utopian to begin with. Everything's happening according to plan. And I think it was, I was having this feeling, and then you said that not the exact same thing, but you said this on a podcast. And I was like, wait, I think Nolan has this down pat. Like, I think this is how it's working out. And there's a lot of people that, again, and we're going to expand on some of these concepts more on the later of the show. We're going to hit the Clarity Act. We're going to hit the financial engineering, that Michael Saylor's doing, Bitcoin as a psychological commodity. We're going to hash out these ideas for you. But when you were saying this the first time, I was like, oh my goodness, like this is the big story. What Nolan is saying is the big story here. And as I've been telling everyone that watches this show, I'm like, these aren't original ideas. Like, go watch Nolan's show. He's the one that's on the ball. I'm just trying to make sure this gets out to more people. So super excited about this.
One of the issues we have is that the best and brightest will just do whatever job pays the best. They don't really care, right? If cattle ranching, and 100 years ago, when it was McKinley as president, his vice president, Teddy Roosevelt, was a cattle rancher. He was an aristocrat, but he went and ranched out in Dakotas, because that's what rich people did. That's what happened when the trains opened up the West. The best job was to be a land-owning cattle rancher. It was not some like, I'm going to go be rustic. Being a Wall Street guy back then was low class. If you were a Wall Street guy in the night before fiat, you were a swindler and a scammer and a low IQ idiot. You were just a gambler. You were one step above the shoe shiners that were there trying to, make those guys look like peacocks so they could go on the trading floor and do whatever it was they did, trade inside information and just be generally scammy. They had low reputations. They were not like high society of New York. It was a low class thing to do to be a Wall Street guy. Now, when fiat came in, it completely changed the dynamic. And as I said, the highest paid jobs, if financial engineer on Wall Street is the highest paid job, guess who you're going to get? You're going to get all of the high IQ, super capable people. And what we're dealing with, the reason why we have to do it this way is because the obstacle to Bitcoin is all the fucking know-it-alls on Wall Street. And they've been there for 80 years, sitting around. Oh, let me tell you, the yen carry trade is fundamental to all these people, because they can't admit it's cognitive dissonance. The people who have the most invested in the system simply can't see the difference. And that's why the Bitcoin IQ bell curve has always rung so true to Bitcoiners, because we can see the super high IQ people who get it, who aren't attached to the ideas, aren't attached to the ego, the reputation, and the low IQ folks, they don't need a big poem on what's going on in the world. They don't need to parse through every single one of Michael Saylor's emails. They don't have to think that Michael Saylor is cheating on them, because it's so feminine coded to hear this stuff. Like, oh, he's cheating. Oh, no, he's not. What's he doing? He looked at someone else's picture online. And so they're doing this all the time. But the truth is, we have this huge human capital in the way of Bitcoin, and they're sitting on Wall Street. They're doing all these stupid moves that have been around, the yen carry trade. They're doing all of these same trades that have been around forever, low creativity, and not really conjuring the future. But if you go ahead and look at SpaceX, for example, I mean, it's the only stock that has made, real waves this year of a nature that we haven't ever seen maybe in history. And that was fundamentally about the narrative behind it, not the fundamentals. The fundamentals are all gone. You're all selling narrative. Everyone's selling narrative. And that's good for Bitcoin, I think. As I've said many times, the worst attack I think Bitcoin has suffered in the past 10 years. Now, there's no way to measure this, but I believe it. I would argue it is when Trump said he wasn't interested. The worst thing that happens to Bitcoin is when it's boring, low apathy, no one likes it, no one's talking about it, and just not arguing anything technical about Bitcoin, right? Because that's stupid. Trump just saying, I'm not a fan, was not good. It was a real punch to Bitcoin. Now, didn't do anything. Whenever I talk about this, I think of that Avengers movie when Thanos gets punched by Iron Man, all the engineering and everything, and it's a drop of blood, right? That's kind of what happened. Everything to do with Trump didn't really hurt Bitcoin that much, but he landed a punch, right? But apathy and lack of interest in a psychological commodity, those are things we don't like. And so using this hype machine, using all of Saylor's abilities, and really attacking the Wall Street identity is the most important thing here. It's the same formula that worked against Bitcoin will work against them. If they can't make money anymore, if their job is seen as stupid and parasitic, it will lead to changes in society.
I love it. This is why we get Nolan on the show, to really bring us back down to, to reality on all of these topics. But again, we're gonna unpack a lot of stuff here. So let's get to the first break so that me and Nolan can, get a glass of water, and then we're gonna keep going, guys. This is just the Simply Nolan show today. This is for you guys that aren't exposed to Nolan's work. I'm just gonna keep Nolan talking, okay, guys? So we'll be right back, and I'm gonna let Nolan rip more. So quick break, 1 second. Here's the part that nobody says out loud. Buying Bitcoin on an exchange and leaving it there isn't buying Bitcoin. It's buying an IOU. And the last decade has been a masterclass in what happens when those exchanges don't deliver on their promises.
Bitcoin Well is a self-custody Bitcoin platform. That means that when you buy Bitcoin, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet. You actually own it from the very first transaction. They're available both in the United States and Canada. Pricing is transparent, straightforward, and no nonsense. And if you're buying a larger amount of Bitcoin, Bitcoin Well Infinite gives you concierge-level support through a dedicated executive Bitcoin advisor, premium help for when it actually matters.
You can also stack a little extra through the referral and wishing well rewards. A nice bonus on top of the owning your own Bitcoin thing. So go to bitcoinwell.com/simply and sign up for the Bitcoin Well portal today and buy Bitcoin you actually own. Paper burns, paper floods, paper fades. If your seed phrase is written on paper, it's not really backed up. It's waiting to disappear. Stampseed's DIY kit lets you hammer your seed words directly into commercial grade titanium. Fireproof, crush-proof, waterproof, and permanent. Once your words are in the metal, they aren't going anywhere. Use code SIMPLY at stampseed.com for 15% off anything in the store. That's stampseed.com, code SIMPLY. All right, guys. So the current Bitcoin price is 64,810. It is a 48.6% discount from all-time high. We are back to the $1.3 trillion market cap. It seems like we've been fluctuating here. It's like, you know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We're, as you guys know in the chat, we're just tired, boss. All right. Anyways, block height 959,860. So we've been talking about the Clarity Act. I'm burnt out on talking about the Clarity Act, guys, but hey, I got to keep you updated on it. And I'm glad Nolan's here because I think he's got a very unique perspective on all this stuff here. So CoinDesk tweeted this morning update. The new Clarity Act draft has been released, merging the Senate Banking and Agricultural Committee versions and adding the ethics provisions for the first time. A motion to proceed is expected today and tomorrow. We'll see if that goes through, with a possible floor vote the week of August 3rd. So guys, as I've been mentioning, it seems like it's moving forward. We still keep getting pushed back. But anyways, that's the update for you. Now, I really am just, you know, I'm here to listen to Nolan. So first of all, Nolan, what is your view on the Clarity Act? Is this going to be good for Bitcoin? Do you even care about it? You know, what is your view with the politicians entering the Bitcoin space? Like, how do you view this from a 3,000-foot view? And then maybe we can get into more of the like nuanced details of the Clarity Act actually passing.
Well, so that, you know, fundamentally first, one of the important things I think we have to think about, even with tokenization, I know Bitcoiners don't like to hear that word because I'm talking about clarity, Bitcoin strategic reserve, genius, sort of a separate story. When it comes to tokenization, what's important, and it is important, I know people, you know, get their mind, they don't want to hear about ICOs and Ethereum. I'm trying not to go there. What I'm talking about here is just making a cryptographic key, the actual species of the money, right? So when the species of the money is fiat, then just I can create fiat right now, right? I can say I owe you money, Opti, and so now I've created money. I've created dollars and all that, right? So when you make it a cryptographic key, when you actually, in the same way that gold and coin specie money, you know, you understand the security features of it, the double spend features of a physical coin. When we start seeing cryptographic keys, because what they are is important, right? What you saw Paolo do with Tether, for example, right? We knew there were stable coins before. The Hong Kong dollar, where he created Tether, was already a stable coin. They needed to have US dollars 1-to-1 in collateral to mint the money. It's the same. I mentioned UAE joining the American system earlier. Same idea. It was a stable coin. You deposit $1 US, you mint either a Hong Kong dollar or a UAE dirham, and it's backed by the money. So it was no surprise that Paolo and Tether figured out this stablecoin game, given that Bitfinex and Tether were sort of created in Hong Kong. So making the stablecoins not a dollar printed by a bank, because the money in Hong Kong is printed by the commercial banks. So you can have, you know, Standard Chartered Bank or HSBC or the Bank of China. Your bills are all printed by the different commercial banks. They all kind of look the same color and the same style, but the actual logo of the bank is on it because they own that money. They minted it because of the USD they have in their account, the same way Tether does. So now I want you to just hold all this in your mind, because think about what happened. All Paolo did, this was not a new invention. We've had people mint US dollar stable coins before. Paolo's genius that turned USDT and Tether into, I guess, the most profitable business in human history or something like that.
Yeah.
Around there, right? All he did was make the form of the money a cryptographic key. So one of the great inventions that Satoshi Nakamoto came up with was, you know, we had cryptographic keys. They had been invented, but they were really only used in war until World War II. And then it became explicitly for war, right? Turing and even the word computer. The word computer is because it was used to compute large numbers for the purposes of cryptography, telling secrets on the internet for the purpose of war. And so what happened after World War II when Turing and Enigma is all cryptography was then deemed munitions, like bombs, like missiles. You couldn't export it. You couldn't develop it. You couldn't create it. It was like a bomb. It was so powerful. And when public key cryptography was invented in the 1970s, it was the first civilian innovation in cryptography in 500 years since the Italian city-state bankers. That was the last time civilians had come up with a cryptographic innovation. After that, it was all war and state. So when the public key cryptography was invented in the 70s, the trickle down, the power of cryptography didn't go to the individual. It actually got co-opted by businesses because we were too stupid to run the cryptographic keys ourselves. So said the original creators of the internet and all that. Ah, you're too dumb. You can't use a key. Give me your mother's maiden name and the dog's name and I'll run your keys for you. And that created this huge liability. Satoshi Nakamoto, when he created Bitcoin, actually did something even more fundamental with cryptography. It's not that he made money out of cryptographic keys. It's that he put cryptographic keys directly into people's hands. Bitcoin remains the widest deployment of public key cryptography in the history of the world, seconded only by what Tether did. And because Tether did the same thing, they made the money a cryptographic key. Now, all these economists will always tell you, well, the definition of money is, and then they look in a mirror and they just tell you what they look like. There is no definition of money. It's currency. It literally means current, like the current of electricity, the current of a river. It just means it's moving forward and is useful and adapts to the environment and is part of the environment. In the world we live in today, cryptographic keys are the most useful thing to use for authentication, for transaction. We live in a digital world. So making the key the money, making keys, putting keys in people's hands is almost akin to putting a magic wand into the hands of individuals. So what we see with USDT, what we see with all of that, making cryptographic keys, putting cryptographic keys into people's hands eliminates almost all the need for a lot of the third-party architecture that you see built around us from the digital age and the fiat age. So this whole thing, there's only one story in Bitcoin bigger than Bitcoin, as far as I'm concerned. Only one story transcends what Satoshi Nakamoto did, and that is the cryptographic story, that Satoshi Nakamoto put a cryptographic key in your hand. To me, that's the only thing that transcends Bitcoin. It is Bitcoin, but it transcends the Venn diagram of what Bitcoin can do for the world. Putting the larger subject of a cryptographic key in your hands, not relying on trading your mother's maiden name and your dog's name when you were a kid with someone else who's running your keys for you. Actually doing that. So going back to what I think of for clarity, you can't really predict what this does. Putting cryptographic keys to this scale into people's hands for every asset in the world has huge implications. Just like we couldn't have guessed that we were moving to a bimetallic Bitcoin USDT world when Tether first created Tether back in 2015, 2016, we could never have predicted it would be part of a massive government policy in the United States Treasury to recalibrate the American empire. We couldn't have guessed that. I think it's about the same. We're putting cryptographic keys in people's hands on a whole new scale. And to me, that's an exciting story. Now, I don't give a shit about ICOs. I don't care about crypto projects or any of that stuff. I care about cryptographic keys being put in people's hands. And that's the trend. That's the direction this is headed in. That's the directional certainty that I have from it. And that I'm very bullish on.
Yeah, no, that's, again, one of the most unique takes I've heard from any Bitcoiner making content. And that's why you're one of my favorite. That's why I listen to Nolan, guys. You know, you think where I get interesting stuff? Hey, this is the guy, you know, this is the source. Anyways, another, I think, unique take here is obviously just the broader view of essentially what you just said. You know, there's been, as we've all seen, I don't know how to put it exactly, but like Washington, D.C. and the politicians landing on the Bitcoin doorstep. And as you can see, if you're on Twitter, a part of Bitcoin Twitter, there has been, I think, a cognitive dissonance. There has been, you know, a lot of angry people about this scenario happening. But I think your view on, you know, the Trump administration being super bullish on Bitcoin, it's a very unique take. And my audience might not necessarily agree with it too much, but could you go a little more on that?
Yeah, happy to. You know, when we think of politicians and government, people who don't have experience with this, I guess, can put them all together. Now, I worked for the Prime Minister of Canada before Trudeau. Not Trudeau. And one of the things I'll tell you is that government and politics are not the same, right? So I worked in politics. We can be fired on a whim. We don't even, we were called in our system in Canada, and it's the same in the United States. If you work in political staff or work in politics, you're something called exempt staff, which means you don't have any collective bargaining help. You can be fired for any reason at any time. In fact, politicians lose their job regularly through no fault of their own. They're just on the wrong team. When the team's not trending, people might like them, right? So you have this situation where fiat really manifested in government, not through elected politicians. They were removed from the process when the fiat decades, when the fiat era got going after World War II. World War II was really about consolidating power in the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. That's the government that Bitcoiners have to fight against. Elected politicians are accountable to the people. If you have fair elections and you have a decent media that isn't gained through fiat manipulations, if you have elections that aren't gained through fiat manipulations, you're not going to have any problem with the politicians. They come and they go, and they're not supposed to be that powerful. They're supposed to collectively have a bit of power to change laws or not. They became powerful when they completely abdicated their responsibilities. They became powerful when they hid behind all of their huge omnibus bills, when they throw everything together and they say, oh, there's a rider or pork barrel stuff. If I didn't vote for him, then I'm not getting the money from my county. So they completely removed accountability from the political system. The way they removed political accountability is they put the bureaucracy between the people and the government. The people have to deal with the bureaucracy, which is really what grew from fiat, not the government. We have the same amount of senators. We have the same amount of congressmen, really. We still have one president. We haven't really grown those things. What we did was we withdrew responsibility and accountability using fiat bureaucracy. We consolidated all of this bureaucracy after the World War II, because, you know, Washington, D.C. won World War II. Apparently, if you believe all the fiat myths. And so they just doubled down on this bureaucracy. Remember, it was the women flexing their muscles and we're going to win. And it's, oh, join the government and work hard for the government. And you had the Peace Corps, and then you had all the civic minded people in the 50s and 60s. I want to work for the government. And, you know, some of them were great people. I'm sure some of them were great. What ends up happening, though, entropy sets in, and now you have a world where there is no accountability in the politicians because they don't have any of the feedback loop. They just say, the government, I voted an omnibus. Getting rid of the bureaucracy, which is what the Trump administration is doing. Our bureaucracy in America is now down to the 1960s levels, but it's down to like Kennedy levels, and it's going to keep going. And we're going to keep pushing it away. And eventually, if you get to a world of more government accountability, right, more congressional accountability, more independence, that's a good thing. Seeing all this debating Massey and all these people turning on Trump, that's a great thing. I go back and think about the Clarity Act and what's going on with the Democrats. Their own civil war between Kristen Gillibrand in New York, who's been around Bitcoin and crypto stuff from the beginning, and she sits on the financial committee in the Senate. You know, all these people have their own internal Democrat fight with Mamdani in New York. So they have their own civil war going on. So it's hard to predict what the Democrats are going to do because they're in their own civil war. On the Republican side, there's no more civil war. Trump can mostly get them to do what he wants. So you're going to see this, I think, anyway, recalibration of the American system, and you'll see more accountability, I think, in the end. We're going to get rid of the bureaucracy, and that's already happening.
Yeah. Let me see. Maybe could you expand a little more on the idea of the American system? Because, you know, a lot of people, either they don't understand that, like, we don't live in a capitalist system, or they think we live in a capitalist system, and that's where all the problems come from. I think I saw you with our buddy Brandon Gentile talk a lot about the American system, and I don't think a lot of people talk about that. So could you hint on that real quick before we go into the financial engineering of Saylor?
Yeah, so you can actually see it, you know, Greg Gutfeld, you guys know who Greg Gutfeld is? He's I think he hosts the most popular show on evening cable news. He brought up this idea once, and it's called the fake prison of two ideas. And that's the Democrat, Republican type of quagmire you can find yourself in. And we see that with communism and capitalism. Oh, it's free market stuff, or it's take all your shit and you have no say. It's one or the other extreme. America was never really from those two extremes. America came from a system that was about building American capacity. If you go back, America, we just celebrated our 250th anniversary this summer. You can almost divide the American history into two equal 125-year parts. One of them was the Revolutionary America part, started in 1776, the Hamiltonian Henry Clay version of America, which was indeed build capacity for everyone to benefit. Invest all your money into a handful of public works projects that benefit everybody. Use the power of the federal government, not to give a welfare check to one degenerate low IQ bum, but to build a infrastructure, a power plant, a Hoover Dam, if you will. That kind of stuff will create a economic benefit for everybody. And so when you start hearing these days about Trump and talking about the AI data boom, it's really an energy data boom. We don't care so much about the AI. More energy, more capacity for the people, using the federal government's incredible financing powers, incredible purchasing powers in order to make that happen. That's the American system. And so the American system, if you go from Hamiltonian, Henry Clay, the beginning of the Revolutionary America, 1776, and it goes all the way up to McKinley when he was killed. That's 125 years. So you get to 1899, and there you are celebrating the 125th anniversary of the United States, and the president is assassinated. And what ends up happening is the London financier system begins almost right away. You have about 12 more years before the Federal Reserve and income tax start. Before that, you had no income tax. You had nothing like a Federal Reserve. They tried to create one. It was destroyed each time. They tried to create one Hamilton, and then you saw in Andrew Jackson destroy it a couple of years later. So the American system was all about pooling capital that the country gets through tariffs, not income tax. There was no income tax. You get it through consumption taxes, and then you use that capacity to build things that will help everybody. So in this case, it would be in the 1890s, it would have been the rail, the canals, the Erie Canal, for example. You see all of these huge public works projects. I mean, the Erie Canal, look what it did to Buffalo and everything on the way to Albany, and it opened up the whole Great Lakes. And you created this whole new way to settle land, and you created all these new capacities that didn't exist before. We did that for years. And then the London system, the financier system, came in and said, oh, it's free market. The communists are here. This communist capitalist split, this fake prison of two ideas, really got going in this period where we see from McKinley dying and the beginning of the Federal Reserve. So getting back to the American system is about investing in things that will help American life, that will make things cheaper, more accessible, more efficient. It's not welfare checks. It's not the Great Society of Lyndon B. Johnson and PBS and telling you how to think and imagine subsidized news. No, it's not that. It's subsidized nuclear reactors. All right. And we didn't do that for years, and we can get back to that now.
Amazing. Amazing. All right. Last break here, and then I'm going to just unleash Nolan with what I thought was one of the most interesting ideas. It's, hey, financial engineering to get out of financial engineering. We touched on it in the beginning. We will touch on Saylor, some recent news here. It might make you feel a little uncomfortable here because you're probably on the, anti-big Bitcoin side of this equation, but I think this is one of the most important conversations that we have. So again, last break. We'll be right back.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, Ledin. Here's something most Bitcoin holders never figure out until it's too late. You're sitting on wealth you can't touch without selling. Ledin fixes that. Bitcoin-backed loans. You keep your stack, you get cash. And they just introduced their lowest rates ever. No complexity, no fine print. The larger the loan, the lower the rate. These new rates apply to all new loans, refinances, and renewals. You'll see all the rates up front before you apply. The new, lower rates come with Ledin's gold standard protection. Your Bitcoin remains custodied and is never lent out for interest. Perfect 8-year track record of keeping clients' assets safe. Auto top-ups, LTV alerts, and partial repayments to keep you in control. Repay whenever you want with zero penalties or monthly payments. Ledin's perfect $10 billion track record through every market cycle in the last 8 years speaks for itself. Don't choose between a great rate and the safety of your Bitcoin. Get both at Ledin. If you ever thought, what happens to my Bitcoin if something happens to me? Or what happens if I lose my phone? You're not alone. For a lot of people, the biggest barrier to self-custody isn't buying Bitcoin. It's the fear of making a mistake. And that's why I like Bitkey, and I recommend it to my friends and family. Bitkey is a Bitcoin wallet built for real life, not just for day one, but for everything that happens in between. Lost devices, upgrades, accidents, and long-term ownership. There's no seed phrase to write down and worry about losing, and no single point of failure that can lock you out of your Bitcoin forever. What really stands out about Bitkey is the peace of mind. Recovery is built in, inheritance is built in. It's a complete self-custody system built by the team behind Square and Cash App, designed to make holding your own Bitcoin simpler and safer. Take self-custody of your Bitcoin today using Bitkey. Go to bitkey.world and use promo code SIMPLY for 10% off your new Bitkey. That's bitkey.world, promo code SIMPLY. I want to give a shout out to our partner, HIVE Digital Technologies. Fueled by clean energy across 3 continents, HIVE runs dual engines, Bitcoin mining and AI compute. Their AI platform is ranked #1 in the world for network performance, and it's doing something bigger than compute. It's accelerating human discovery, the science, the breakthroughs, pushing humanity further and faster. Listed on the NASDAQ with the ticker HIVE. Catch the latest buzz at HIVE Digital Tech on X or hivedigitaltech.com.
You secured your Bitcoin, but did you secure your devices too? They're still broadcasting your location and digital footprint. GPS, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cell, 5G, EMF, all of it is leaking. Escape Zone fixes that. Their Faraday bags block every signal your device emits, so you decide when you're detectable, not the grid. Built for Bitcoiners who know sovereignty isn't just your wallet. It's your phone, your hardware wallet, your keys, and your entire digital life. Go to escapezone.com/simply and use code SIMPLY for 10% off. That's escapezone.com/simply, code SIMPLY. All right, guys. So I'm unleashing Nolan here, but before I do that, just to give you guys an update, this is one of my favorite conversations that I've heard from Nolan. It really flips a lot of the arguments you hear on its head. But first, the news here. Saylor increases USD reserves to 525 million, achieving 2.1 years of dividend coverage in cash. Now they hold $3.75 billion. Obviously, we've been covering this saga since that initial kind of stretch. I know it's not a DPEG, but that's how everyone's framing it. They still hold 843,775 Bitcoin. At the same time, they did do a $288,000 stretch buyback for $25 million, plan to be a disciplined buyer of their digital credit product. And I think this might be the best way to tee up this whole conversation. We saw Saylor tweet this over the weekend, and a lot of people are losing their heads here. So Saylor just tweeted to reject Bitcoin's integration with banks and corporations, custodians and exchanges, equity and credit markets, governments and currencies is to deny its benefit to 99% of the world and doom it to 1% of its potential. And Nolan, I do have his new book list. I don't know if we want to really touch on that, but you know, Saylor going on Upgrade the World tour, giving you books to read, building out the knowledge base of Bitcoin. So anyways, that's the Saylor news. Yeah, maybe when you cover this and you see this, you probably don't understand what Saylor's doing. And this is where Nolan comes in, where I think the best way to frame it was, look, to get out of the financial engineering that we have been living in the fiat system, we need a, evil genius rocket scientist to do the financial engineering with Bitcoin to get us out of this position. So we talked about it a little bit in the beginning, but I think this is going to be more long form so that Nolan can really expand on this idea for you guys so that we can set the rest of the year with the right mentality of what is going on right now. And I think that's the big picture here. Like, Nolan, what is going on right now for everyone that's just loosely following the Bitcoin news? What are you seeing?
Well, I'm going to, we practiced before. I know I can share a screen, so I'm going to share a whiteboard.
Let's go.
I love these whiteboards. I make a lot of whiteboards. I like to draw things. I like to put them up like this. Let me make this a little more beautiful for all of us because it's annoyingly framed
Just
here.
zoom in. Just, yeah. Zoom in. Just pinch. or double tap. Oh wait, are you on an Apple or are you a?
I'm on a Mac. I'm on a desktop too.
Okay. Oh, a desktop. Okay.
Anyway.
How do you zoom in? I don't know. Plus, Command plus.
No.
Yeah. Oh no.
Nah, not helping. Anyway, let's just go with it. I have to leave it up for 1 second too. I can take it down. What I want to show though, and this is where I think the anxiety is coming from with Saylor, and we're in a liminal space. A liminal space is, when it's summer and you go into a school and it's abandoned and no one's around, or these people go into these malls now that are found after 20 years and they'll say, oh, it's like the 90s, and it gives a sense of anxiety, right? So the spaces in between are inherently anxiety filled, liminal space. And as we go through this change, some people call it a fourth turning. Some people just call it Bitcoinization, right? We're at an end of an era and the start of a new era. And Bitcoiners are begging for this new era. So I've often characterized World War III, there's definitely dead bodies around in Iran and Ukraine and Russia. So it's a bit hot. But the real principle of World War III, which I think got going in the financial crisis, it's when the government weaponized Wall Street, weaponized media. New York Times started to, God forbid, more of the Occupy Wall Street black and white people protesting the scammers of Wall Street together. Got to stop that, right? All of a sudden, New York Times, every other article is about racism and this and that. So what I see here is World War III being economic and psychological. And those are the real battlefronts of World War III. And I put this together a few years ago to articulate who the belligerents are in World War III, as I see them. So I think of the Axis powers still, Iran and Russia, China. They're still around, and they've got a strategy, right, to win. It's mutually assured destruction. They get their information from the firewall, and their money is somewhat more commodity based than fiat, right? We see what Russia's done with the sanctions, and China already has a bimetallic system. They have a domestic consumption money and they have a balance sheet money, and they create a lot of energy. Now the allies, I call them the all-eyes, not the allies. They're the all-eyes. And the all-eyes really come from this pure fiat distilled version. And you can see the Axis have already tried to get out of this fiat London financial system. Their strategy, of course, is fiat growth, right? Pump the money. That's how they're going to win. We're going to win by being rich. We've got our trademark censored internet. Our money comes from the Federal Reserve. That's the UK. It used to be America under Joe Biden, but Trump really got America out of this. That's why there is a kind of Anglosphere civil war going on right now. And a lot of people in America are caught up in that, especially a lot of Trump supporters, right? They get caught up in this Anglosphere civil war. But there's a third group, and this is the Michael Saylor group. And this is where I start seeing Michael Saylor's strategy. And when you look at these two sides coming in, right? Saylor has to survive this. He's in a war. He's not trying to get style points. There's no points for beauty. There's no aesthetics. There's none of that's happening. He has to win and survive. And people are going to bet against him. He's been dealing with fiat manipulation, the fiat incentives, the sideways nature of strategy even years ago from the financial crash till now. He's been dealing with the lack of productivity, the lack of real incentives in Wall Street, the complete and total financial engineering of it. That is their strategy. Go back to my whiteboard. That is the strategy of fiat, to win through juicing the markets. Now, our strategy to win as Bitcoiners is much more simple than that. And this is where I see the Trump administration, where I see Bitcoiners in general. Our belligerent group are the ables. We're capable of doing this stuff. And our strategy to win is literally to be better people, to build, to not get caught up in the fights of today. Oh, they put a trans in the Odyssey. Oh my God, I'm going to light myself on fire and hate the movies. And no, I didn't go see it. I heard it was not bad though. And I heard it made fun of, pretend males who were standing instead of the real coward who should have gone to fight. And there was all kinds of reasons why it was done the way it was done. But getting all worked up and upset about Saylor and all of that stuff is not really the strategy that we need to win. The strategy we need to win is exactly what you see here. It's to be better people. It's to build. It's to create the new world, not cry about who's stopping us from creating the new world. Oh, they printed more money. Oh no, fiat, the sludge people are doing sludge people stuff. It's going to be like that anyway. There's no avoiding that. You have to go out and build things. You have to actually create this new world, because in the end, we're not going to win on arguments as Bitcoiners. If we could win on arguments, we'd have already won. We're not dealing with logic here. If it was pure math, if economics and money were really about math, we'd already be on a pure Bitcoin standard. It's not. It has nothing to do with it. There's numbers, so people think math is involved, but it's all psychology. The US dollar is a psychological commodity. Bitcoin is a psychological commodity. And when I hear Michael Saylor talk about the secure integration, I've been writing about the secure integration of Wall Street to Bitcoin for 12 years now. I've said those exact words many times. How do we create the secure integration? Go back to what I said about cryptographic keys. It's how to get them used to using cryptographic keys as money, as a bearer instrument. They didn't know anything about that 10 years ago. Now they do. So when he's talking about the secure integration of Wall Street and Bitcoin, it's about getting them used to using keys. It's about getting them on the cryptographic key networks, the cryptographic networks. Of course, go back to Tether. Tether bootstrapped its entire stablecoin market because it tapped into Bitcoin culture. It tapped into Bitcoiners doing Bitcoin things. And this whole way of winning this war isn't by arguments. Anyone who could be persuaded into Bitcoin by arguments now has already been done. It's already happened. From now on, it's about alignment with power, alignment with success. It's about doing amazing things, and other people, not because they heard an argument about 21 million Bitcoins and fiat's unlimited. It's they go, oh, I want to be like that guy. Oh, I want to be like her. And that's what changes people's minds. It's about presenting this world and having people see where power is aligned. And that's why this weekend, right, you see Saylor going off on his own saying, be a better person. You can just look at those belligerents again. Look at China, right? Look at Axis. Bill Pulte, a Bitcoiner, the head of the national security, whatever they call it, agency. He was giving away Bitcoin 10 years ago to people on Twitter, right? Hey, who wants Bitcoin? Who wants to do something nice? Here's some Bitcoin. So he's the head of national security. The second Bitcoiner to become the head of national security agency, Tulsi Gabbard, was the head before. The next one, Clayton, was a Bitcoiner too. So we're going to have 3 straight national security administrators, directors of national security, that are Bitcoiners. 3 straight. And so what did he do today? Well, he went after China and the election systems. Of course, don't trust, verify applies to election systems. I don't know how the 2020 election was stolen, but it was stolen. How do I know? Because you can't audit it, okay? If I can't tell you what happened, there is an Ethereum transaction election. There's no election in 2020. There barely was in 2024. We don't have elections. There's a thing where you go and you put your ballot in a box, and then nobody knows anything else. That's the end of it, right? So just look, the Axis folks, they're not winning, right? It's not happening for them. Go and look at the allies, right? What did we see this weekend? We saw Elon Musk, because the allies, if they're not lying, they're not winning. They have to lie. Like, it's fiat, right? If they can't grow their market, if they can't have their trademarked internet, there's nothing happening. So if they can't lie to people to tell them what's going on, if fiat, which is government declarations of money, aren't believed, then the system collapses. So what did you see this weekend? You saw the editor-in-chief of The Economist trying to interview Elon Musk. It didn't go very well for her. She's there saying, oh, people hate you, Elon. And all he said was, well, they hate you way more. You're a journalist. People hate your guts. And then this dumb idiot has to go out and do content all week and check out my interview with Elon Musk. She's doing it like she has some podcast interview. She's the editor-in-chief of The Economist. It's over. It's done. No one cares. Their lies don't carry. There's many examples of this. We saw it from the richest man in Europe did the same this weekend. Le Monde, which is the biggest newspaper in France, right, came out and said, oh, Bernard Arnault, he's the guy who owns the LMVH and all that stuff, the luxury brand. Right now, a complete and total fiat trap, this guy, right? He just got cheap money from the European Union, the European Bank. He went and bought Tiffany's in America, kind of like the yen carry trade. He was getting free money to go invest everywhere else. He did exactly what they do in Japan. And he became very rich as a result. Good for him. They tried to run this hit piece on him. And just as we've all learned from Trump, and Trump did a master show on this weekend when he did it's a work of art when he called Caitlin Collins Dylan Mulvaney. I mean, come on. It's a work of art, because everyone's like, wait a minute, you can't insult her. And he's like, what do you mean insult? You said she's so pretty. So he got them all caught up in this thing. But that example that he's used, right, that he's shown over the years, don't enter the frame. It's like Saylor, don't enter the frame. Use your own frame, build, do your own thing. Trump showed us what to do with the legacy media for 10 years now. Don't enter the frame. And what we saw from Elon Musk is he gets that now, right? He didn't enter the frame with her. He said, no, people hate you more. If he'd sit there and start saying, oh, they don't hate me. What do you mean? It's just some people. No, he said, people hate your disgusting face even more. You're a stupid sludge person journalist and everybody hates your guts. And so that is people learning really how to dull the edge of the fiat attack pattern. You're seeing this very optimistically, the richest man in the world. And then even worse than that, you can even distill this all eyes whole pantomime on this weekend just to show you the direction of things, the directionality. Axis losing, fiat, sludge people losing, but the authority of fiat even took a much bigger hit. If you look at Fauci's diary, did anyone see Fauci's diary got published this weekend? Right. So death statistics are like, oh, there are a lot of deaths, but I had a lot of good press. I'm doing great. Look at, they love me. I'm the most popular person in the world. I'm the best. I'm Fauci. He calculated it. He tabulated every single press instance that he had. So the all eyes, characterized by Fauci, characterized by Limon, characterized by The Economist, all of this showing directionally that everything in the world that we hold dear as Bitcoiners is pulling in our direction. You see Wall Street and the incentives there, Saylor not falling for the tricks, not falling for the purity tests. Remember, it's a 2-point fight, right? So Saylor's not just fighting against the sludge people, he's fighting against all the fiat market manipulators and the purity Bitcoiners. And then you get the other side of the equation, Bitcoiners in the middle, attacked by these fiat institutions, the legacy media. That's not working either. What I see here is everything in the world, China weakening, Russia going to have to adopt Bitcoin, Japan going to have to adopt Bitcoin, and then going over and looking at what's going on in Europe, going on and looking on what's going on in fiat. And you see the ables, people reading Michael Saylor's Be Better, How to Build reading list, are poised to remake the world. And they're not fighting about all these other stupid things. They're just building. And that's the answer here.
Absolutely love it. I mean, the chat was like good analysis. Someone did ask this, Nolan, and maybe just some context on who you are. Obviously, you've been a part of some of the biggest, Bitcoin stories for longer than I even knew about Bitcoin. But someone asked here, man, hopefully I can find it. They basically said something like, Nolan, oh, here we go. What was or were your areas of study? So like maybe just put a little, who is Nolan and how do you come to these conclusions? I would say you've been around the block for a very long time and this is what you've been doing for over a decade. So just to answer this for the audience, Nolan, how did you see the big picture?
So for Bitcoin, I was trained as a lawyer. I never really practiced. I was actually in Japan when Bitcoin was created, working as a lawyer. I have a hilarious story. I went back for the 10 years of Bitcoin in 2019 and was in Osaka. I was on my way to Tokyo for a scaling Bitcoin event. And I was just looking for a place to eat and went one place after the other. And I saw a Bitcoin sign. I said, I'll go in there and eat a little curry shop. And Osaka is bigger than New York City. It's like one of the biggest cities in the world. And I just go into a random place. I mean, random. And a guy behind the counter points at me and he goes, Nolan Bauerle. And I said, what the fuck are you talking about? And then I'm like, what? And then my wife walks in, he knew her name too. And I said, what is going on? He goes, 10 years ago, October 31st, 2008, we were partying together. And I was like, oh yeah, because that's when I was a lawyer. And he said, we should have been buying Bitcoin. We should have been reading the mailing list or whatever.
Yeah.
And I said, hilarious. So a funny coincidence. So indeed, I was a lawyer and I ended up working for the Prime Minister of Canada, in particular on the Senate Banking Committee in Canada. I ran for our Congress, I guess you can say, in Canada at the time. I didn't win, but the job I did while being a candidate was to work in the Senate Banking Committee. And I was all in on politics at that time. But then 2011 happened and we won a majority election. So we became the majority power in Canada. But then they decided to go and to be like an administrative government. I knew something like Trudeau's office was across the hall from mine at the time. And I said, guys, the fake news is going to make him the prime minister. Like no one is going to reward you for being right. There's no right and wrong here, guys. This is fake news and us. So you got to take your chance, get rid of the public broadcaster, change society. in Canada. They chose to not do that. And so I had a study at the time. I did it on FATF, so the money laundering regime. And that was my job. I did media hijacking, I guess you could say, where I would take a study and turn the study into something the media had to cover that would be beneficial to us. And what I found out was, at the time, the Canadian federalism copies American federalism exactly, except we made banking federal. And we made banking federal for a bunch of reasons, but anyway, it's federal in Canada. So the Senate Banking Committee, they said, on a federal committee, was a powerful committee for this reason. And so FATF came through, and we have federal banks in Canada and state banks in Canada. But the state banks have a different charter. It's like a co-op. It's not exactly a bank. And what we were hearing from these guys was the compliance rules, the $10,000 thing, the FATF travel rule and all that. They weren't allowing the charter of the state chartered banks didn't allow them to corporatize compliance. What that means is at every branch, they had to do it, versus a federal bank, which can send it all to like one floor at their head office in Toronto or whatever. And so it was an unfair advantage. They were having to, at each branch, decide on a loan officer or a compliance officer. So in my world, I said, this is beautiful. FATF, a Parisian bureaucracy telling small town Canadian rural farming banks what to do. I said, golden. This is just perfect politics. The Prime Minister hated FATF. He hated the bureaucracy around it. I had permission to destroy FATF. I was literally given a mandate to destroy it. And in this study, I found out just how treacherous they were. I got liberals and conservatives, everybody mad at them, irrespective party, because I showed they were not catching any money laundering. It was all fake. They cut 0 people. But in that study, just as my confidence in government is failing, they're not going to change the world. They're going to fall into this fiat news trap. They're garbage. They're finished. They're over. I was also doing this study on FATF. I learned about Bitcoin in 2012 on the study, just interviewing a guy who was like, wait, do you hear about this Bitcoin thing? And I was like, what's that? And it was Silk Road, and it was just about to start, and da-da-da. So I got $1 million to do a Bitcoin study in 2013 with the committee, and got Andreas Antonopoulos there. It was a big hit. I used the op return, all the ordinals. I used it back then as a publicity stunt, because that was my job, publicity stunts. So I hashed the report into Bitcoin's blockchain using op return in 2015. And that was a big publicity stunt that got me covered by everybody, Vice, and it made a big amplification. But I also got in touch with Barry Silbert and Pete Rizzo and a few others, because he had just bought CoinDesk. And so I moved to New York City as CoinDesk grew out of New York, worked there until, let's say COVID. And at that point, Bitcoin Magazine had gone full Bitcoin only. And that's really what I wanted to do. I grew up in a world where I had all the Bitcoin core devs around me from a very early time in Bitcoin, from about 2014 when Blockstream started. Blockstream was started in Montreal. So all of the core devs were coming through Montreal all the time, and Toronto. I was actually working where Bitcoin Magazine was created and Ethereum was created when I left the Senate. It's the Decentral it was called, and Toronto was like where the first ATM for Bitcoin was, and Vitalik Buterin was there creating Ethereum, but also Bitcoin Magazine, and big lineup of drug dealers all the time using machines, which we loved. But I could see crypto starting, so I never really fell for it. Like, people who were around back then could see it from the very beginning, so I never really went into crypto. I didn't think it was that interesting. As I had the benefit of all these Bitcoiners around me at the time. And so when Bitcoin Magazine went Bitcoin only, I joined Bitcoin Magazine to produce the Bitcoin conference, and then produced the Bitcoin conference up until the Trump show in 2024, and have been sort of on my own since.
Absolutely amazing lore there, Nolan. I think maybe to give the audience here like practical, like what can they be doing kind of to wrap up today's show. I think you gave them a really good analysis that most people, I think, are going to have to rewatch this so they can kind of reprogram their brain. And that is one of the things that you constantly talk about, is what we're dealing with is reprogramming brains here. And so what I like to do at the end of the show is usually just giving people a platform to get their final message across. But I'm going to change it a little differently here, Nolan. Since we know, the corporate press is on the way down, independent content creators are on the way up, the Bitcoin message isn't going to get across by, the math or like end the Fed memes. Like, I think that era's over. I've been talking about that constantly. I liked how you said it's about like the stories of Bitcoin. It's about being like a winner with Bitcoin. So just with that kind of in mind, like, what do you think that we should all be doing here? Like, how do we get this Bitcoin thing to the next level? I see my friend in here, Senior Gringo Poppy. He's always like, win 150K, win $1 million. So with that context, like, how do we just get this to more people? You know, obviously, I've been very adamant recently of just like, I'm a number go up maxi guys. Like, hey, it is what it is. I love number go up. Let's all be honest. That's what's going to drive the next round. But, you know, someone that also does media, it's like, how do we better market this? How do we get this message across better to more people? Like, what does success look like for you? Not just the end of this year, but moving forward for the next 5+ 10 years.
I'll go back to the Abel's piece. You know, all this anxiety about what jobs are going to exist with AI in the future. Well, all the fake fiat jobs are dead. They're toast. All the laptop jobs, all the email jobs, none of that was ever real to begin with. During COVID, we kind of saw it, right? When the economy shut down, but the, I guess, fake GDP of the country didn't really change. It's because energy and these things were still the driving forces behind the real economy, the productive economy. As I worked in restaurants for years, we don't really need them, right? It's a great place to get some cash if you're slinging plates as a teenager, 20 years old, whatever, between jobs. Awesome stuff. Love it. The change will come, right? The change will come when you look at, just for example, Michael Saylor sharing the how to be a better person, but go deeper into that, right? What does being a better person look like? Well, Elon Musk, when he created his SpaceX company, SpaceX isn't just a company. It's kind of a Bitcoin citadel. It's kind of like a proto citadel. He has his own town, Starbase, right? Yeah. It's got the sovereignty stack. You hear a lot about the El Salvador sovereignty stack or the freedom stack. When I think of what all these Bitcoiners have done already with Bitcoin at, 60K, 70K, up to 100K, you saw Tether and Paolo, Plan B, and then he's going to invest in El Salvador. He's going to build up these communities. And what are these communities going to be made of? The old jobs, father, mother, sister, brother. We're terrible at these jobs, like literally terrible, right? The fiat system completely disincentivized the successful conduct of these jobs and even the respect of these jobs. Mothers get stay-at-home moms get no respect, stay-at-home dads get no respect. So they don't get respect for a reason, because it wasn't really a way to have a healthy family in the fiat era. It meant you were like kind of getting, government handouts and stuff. So what it comes down to is building and doing stuff that actually creates alignment with people. That's persuasive. A Bitcoin citadel is not long off now. If we've got Starbase, if you've got Plan B in Lugano, you've got what we see, these proto citadels all over America already. What is PubKey but a proto Bitcoin citadel? How much more would Bitcoin need to be worth for PubKey to turn into like a campground that people stay at all summer? How much would Bitcoin need to be at for PubKey or Bitcoin Park to turn into Bitcoin Village? It's not that much more, right? We're almost there. So as you produce more Bitcoiners that are actually authoring the future, that are authoring the golden age, putting this golden age together is the key here. And we can see the golden age coming together. Paolo gave the cryptographic keys. He's working on a citadel. Trump, for example, he's mining Bitcoin with the kid. Eric is mining the Bitcoin with the US military flags. You've got the Freedom City contest he's talking about all the time. These are cities made from scratch. These are Starbase, but different models are going to be accepted. If a Bitcoin miner can't win one of the Freedom City contests pitches to create a new Freedom City, well, then it was never real in the first place. So I'm not worried about it. We're going to win one at least. So at least one of the 10 cities that Trump is going to create, probably by the end of his mandate, right? He's got all these other things. This could even be a thing that he does when he's ex-president, right? It's the kind of thing that if JD Vance wins next or Rubio, they'll probably set Trump up in this like build a Freedom City model situation, right? So you're starting to see this real capacity to build. You're seeing folks, even going further. Saylor, what would it mean if we have disciplined capital allocation come to Wall Street in this new version of a Bitcoinized Wall Street? What does it look like when the money that America can risk to grow goes into things that actually have a high likelihood of growing, not pet rocks and other consumer habits? What if it goes into more nuclear reactors? So all of these things together, what happens when a Bitcoiner starts building his own, a Bitcoin miner, for example, says, you know what, I'm sick of these electrical bills. I'm going to go build a nuclear reactor to mine Bitcoin, and there'll be a little extra electricity. I'll share it with the town that sprung up next to me. That's the world where people start aligning with Bitcoin, because it's so attractive to see these citadels come to life, these new cities come to life, with people behaving in archetypal ways that are inspiring. Mother, father, brother, sister, all of these things will become much more important as Bitcoin goes forward. A healthy Bitcoin dad. You see all these Bitcoin dads. I mean, what was Andreas Antonopoulos but everybody's Bitcoin dad? What was he but that, right? Or mom, or whatever you want to call it, right? What are all the Bitcoin builders but bros? They're doing the bro science, the lifting the weights, right? Bitcoin analysts that just share their information, right? This is not normal on Wall Street. They don't share information like a girl you go to school with who shares your notes because she has a crush on you, right? That's not what happens. That's what we did in Bitcoin, right? Our analysts just, hey, look what I found. Look what Willy Woo has to say. Look what Lynn Alden has to say. Lynn Alden says, she shares it all, right? She's like your sister, right? She's just sharing for fun. Like, you missed class today, here's the notes. That's not how Wall Street operated before at all, right? And we've got these archetypes that are evolving and are expressly made for this liminal space, for this time of change. And it's builders, it's, Arthur Hayes. You take Arthur Hayes, he's been an outlaw since he started. He's just an outlaw, right? And it's an attractive identity. It's an attractive archetype. People who have nothing to do with Bitcoin look at Arthur Hayes and they go, wow, right? He went to jail, got a pardon, bet on real markets and skis around the world. This is attractive to some people, and they want to be like Arthur Hayes. It's not because they said, wow, Arthur Hayes is the best writer in Bitcoin and I can't wait to hear what he writes, right? That's not what happens, right? People don't change their mind because of arguments. They change their mind because it brings them some incredible advantage. And I'm talking about general. Some people can change their mind with arguments, but alignment comes through building. It comes really through conjuring this golden age. As we manifest the golden age, more people are going to want to align with it. And so you just have to get out there and show what the golden age looks like. The golden age is energy abundance. It is mastery over whatever field you're in, whatever it is, be good at it, right? Because that's the only way it's going to pay in the future. If you're building chairs, build good chairs, right? There was no incentive like that in fiat. So it's about doing the things you set out to well, because you have the focus and the time and the attention span. These are huge, huge, huge commodities now in this time preference, stressed out, low attention span age, with no discipline and all these things. So it is just about evolving. It is about clearing up our psychological space and making that attractive.
Hold on. Get the horns. Nolan, I absolutely love that. This is why you're one of my favorite content creators, because, I always joke, everyone knows me as Opti, Optimus, like it is a way of life. But even us perpetual optimists sometimes get beat up, and we start feeling like, man. And that's where like my last question for you is going to go, for like the audience out there that are currently feeling the demoralization. Obviously, I think that last rip will just get them inspired overall. But for the people right now that are watching this space evolve, and maybe they're newer to Bitcoin, or maybe they've been around for a long time and they're kind of feeling dejected. They're like, I don't know if this is the right way. It's not happening how I thought. The BIP 110 guys, even, it's like there is a general, like you mentioned earlier, it's, Bitcoin's being ignored. There's this general kind of, really bad sentiment at the bottom of a bear market. How do you actually, maybe it's more personal, how do you fight the general, sometimes I just feel beat up and I need to keep going mentality?
You have to, winning changes that, right? So,
Yes.
string of losses, terrible, right? So, and we've had a lot of losses over the past couple of years. So I think articulating the vision of what it looks like when we win, already celebrating our wins when they happen. So Saylor, not inventing and hallucinating losses, right? Saylor selling some MSTR to buy some STRC, not really a loss. Like, you can't get upset about that. It's not a loss. So not letting losses bother you. It's just the sports cliches, I think, right? It's, winning aligns a lot of people's energy. It aligns a lot of chemistry, right? People like winning. So indeed, it's been tough without any of the big wins in the past little while, or with, some of the trends that are out there, but it's an energy game, right? We just realize when you look at where the energy is headed, there's no math involved. None of that is going on, right? What the volumes are down, the hash rate's down, what's going on? It's energy. That's why the only thing I don't like in the market right now is the attractiveness of AI, but already that's starting to wobble a bit, right? We see the limit of AI anyway. There's a sort of beauty contest that Bitcoin is in against AI. I think AI is going to age, if you will, in a beauty context metaphor sense, quicker than Bitcoin. I don't think Bitcoin, entropy resistant. I think she stays beautiful forever. AI not going to look that great, right? What I see is that idea that building, winning, all of those things gather momentum. We can already see where the energy is headed. Everything is pulling in one way that looks good for Bitcoin. So as long as that keeps being the case, I don't see why the price matters. I look at Japan. Where's Japan going to go? What are they going to do? Are they going to hold more yen? No scenario allows them to raise interest rates. It's impossible. So that's not happening. Are they going to hold more dollar? Yeah, probably for a little while, but that still is a problem because then they're not sovereign anymore. They don't really have collateral. It's just US collateral. And so they need their own instruments. They need their own levers. So where are they going to end up eventually? I think it's Bitcoin. So you look at the direction of things. Again, Saylor's gambit here. Saylor now has guaranteed his survival for this cycle. He's guaranteed it. All the money that they just had, he's not going to die in this cycle. So surviving is part of it, right? And that's where I've been at for this whole downturn, survive. But realize and envision what the golden age looks like. And every day you put, proof of work towards that golden age. It's going to be citadels. It's going to be healthier food. It's going to be healthier families. It's going to be these things. That's why the ables are the framework to win this. It's about, right, having a better strategy for information, a better strategy for money, and a better strategy to win. Our strategy to win is to be better people, not juiced markets, not mutually assured destruction like the Axis. It is being better people. And I look at the energy and where it's headed, both the physical, real energy and just the spirit of people. Everything seems to be pulling in the same direction that I've been pulling in for over 10 years now. I see no counterforce that's worth a damn that I have to worry about. I see some Bitcoiners crashing out. I get it. It's a psychological problem. Bitcoiners are uncomfortable winning. I'll give the example. I was a Chicago Cubs fan my whole life. Why was I a Cubs fan? Because I found out they hadn't won the World Series since 1908. Now, go back to 2016, and I'm watching the Cubs about to close out the World Series. I'd already had, Bitcoin's already going up, so I'm already having one of my weird bets pay off. I bet a ton on Trump winning in 2016. I was sure from day one, never doubted he'd win. So I'm getting a lot of I'm getting my way right now in 2016. And then the Cubs win the World Series. And I'm like, well, that's now I can't be I can't be a fan. They're not the biggest losers anymore. And I remember watching the last out and I'm like, I don't like this. I don't think I'm a Cubs fan anymore. I had a great day the next day. We won. I honestly haven't watched a Cub game since. So I think a lot of Bitcoiners are a little bit like that. They loved, I can't mind read, so I don't know if this is the case, but I know Bitcoiners come from a world of being in objection or in antipathy towards institutional power, or in opposition to institutional power. And that's a great posture to have. It's an easy posture to have, but it's a great posture, and we need people like that. There's a certain, I guess, genetic predisposition in humans to rebel, which we love and we don't want to stop. And even if people crash out over Bitcoin because of the instinct to rebel and they think Bitcoin has become too institutional, so they'll rebel again. It's a healthy thing in humanity, and I forgive them all. I don't hold it against any of them. And if they bend the knee to Bitcoin, all is forgiven, right? Stop attacking Bitcoin. We're great, right? So I think that's what it comes down to. People with all the Saylor thing, it's hard for their minds to get around the fact that the whole world is going to start organizing around them, that they don't have to be in opposition to every force, that some things are being done that will just benefit them, like energy systems and all that. So Bitcoiners should be Detroit Lions fans. That's a bridge too far.
Oh man, Nolan. Well, I personally enjoyed this as I always bring up on the show different references of yours, and I'm always like, as my basically like my big brother in this space. You're the one where I'm like, okay, I think Nolan, you said it in the past. I think the best way to wrap this up for me, it's like, look, if you can't predict the future, then you probably need to go back to your priors here, because if you're not good at predicting where things are going, then something's wrong in your thesis and your understanding. And as long as I've been watching you, I'm like, dude, Nolan just keeps predicting this. I'm like, so you are one of those North Stars for me in the Bitcoin content game. Again, like my big brother in this space. We don't talk that much, but every time I see you, I'm like, Nolan, I fangirl out on Nolan all the time. And man, I truly enjoyed this. And someone did mention earlier, Nolan, do you have a channel? I know you're taking kind of a break right now to reprioritize and come back even stronger. So for the people out there that this might be the first time they've ever been exposed to the great Nolan, aka Count BTC, where should we send people? And maybe for the people that are, jonesing for you to come back like me, how much longer are we going to have to wait, man? Where are we on the timeline of you coming back?
Yeah, probably this week. It was just trying to redo the show and reconceptualize it. When I was doing the previous version of so we're in the third version, I guess you could say, of the show now. It existed on Bitcoin Magazine for a couple of years. Then I moved it over to Roxham. Roxham is done with Bitcoin content, so everything shut down. But I was doing the show for 2 hours a day at the time. And that was different than the original version, which was more like 40 minutes to an hour. We just had a mandate to fill to do 2 hours of live stuff. And so I'm taking the time off to really help myself recalibrate, because I developed so many habits to do a 2-hour show and I couldn't forget them easily. So I was having trouble refining what the next version of the show is. We're pretty much there, getting prepped for this show today. Showed me that I have new systems, and I just developed new systems and come up with the idea. And I figured it was summertime, so wasn't too much news, and to, I guess, get myself ready for the next few months, which are going to be a lot of fun. So should have the new show up and running pretty soon. Can't be another 2 weeks, I don't think. But you can find it on Rumble. I have the channel Bitcoin on Rumble. That's my channel. Count BTC will get you there too. There's a weird system on Rumble where you have 2 channels for some reason, one personal and one for the channel. And then on YouTube, I'm at Nolan Bauerle 1, I think, is my YouTube channel. And so I'm on those 2 platforms. Count BTC on Twitter.
Let's go. Well, Nolan, I'm excited for you to come back in prime form here, doing, just the Nolan monologues. Like, again, guys, I know I'm glazing here. But like, this is throughout the last year or so, you watch a lot of Bitcoin content. You've been the consistent Bitcoiner that I think, as everyone saw today, is able to really connect all the dots in politics and culturally and in Bitcoin. Obviously, a longtime bullish Bitcoiner. And so, guys, you can definitely go check out Nolan. And I think we're going to be having Nolan here back, a lot more often, I'm hoping. So anyways, Nolan, I truly enjoyed this. I know I'm going to have to rewatch this one and cringe at myself asking, any questions, because I can't listen to myself. But Nolan, one of the best in the space. So I'm super excited to see you come back. Really appreciate it. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. If you weren't aware of Nolan before, I hope I put him on your radar and you guys go follow him. He is one of the best in the Bitcoin space.
Too much applause, man. I appreciate it.
No.
You're making me blush.
Well deserved. I truly mean it. Go watch Nolan when he comes back. We'll give him some time. Also, daily show during the summer right now is absolutely brutal. And I know Nolan knows it's been rough. Okay. So
I've taken a few, 22 summer I took off, 24 summer I took off. So every second year I kind of take the summer off.
Well, hopefully I can take, I need a break too. Anyways, guys, we'll be back tomorrow. I do have a big week for you guys. A lot of cool guests coming on this week. So things will be maybe more similar to today's show. But on that note, you already know the deal. Actually, back to what Nolan said a minute ago. I end every show very similar. I want you guys to be, spiritually fit, financially fit, physically fit. We are ascending in 2026. get the workout in, get the steps in, get the food in right, get the sun, call your loved ones, and of course, stack some Bitcoin, take it in the cold storage. We are going to win this, all right? We are not going to fall for the doomerism. It's not going to happen. I know we're beat up. But anyways, guys, I'll catch you tomorrow. I hope you enjoyed this show. This was one of my favorites that I've done in a while. Until next time, Nolan, thank you so much. Peace out, guys. See you tomorrow.
Today's episode was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.